Welcome to Motherhood Unstressed, the podcast that empowers and uplifts mothers on their journey through parenthood. Join us for transformative guided meditations and enlightening interviews with experts in mindfulness, parenting, cutting-edge medicine, and self-improvement. Discover practical tools to navigate the challenges of motherhood while cultivating inner peace and resilience. Tune in for a weekly dose of inspiration, support, and the wisdom you need to thrive. Because when moms are unstressed, families flourish. Subscribe now and embark on a journey to a more mindful and fulfilling motherhood. And this week, my guest is Michael O'Brien, renowned meditation teacher and creator of the transformative Pause, Breathe, Reflect meditation and relaxation app. Join us as we explore Michael's incredible journey from surviving a life-altering accident to thriving through the power of meditation. Discover practical insights tailored for busy mothers, unraveling the myth that meditation requires ample time. Michael is sharing invaluable wisdom on turning small ripples into big waves, and he's offering a lifeline for overwhelmed moms and dads to seek balance. Don't miss this opportunity to learn how mindfulness can be seamlessly woven into your daily routine, bringing peace, resilience, and transformative joy to your life. It is possible, and it doesn't take a lot of time every day. I hope you enjoy this episode with Michael. His energy, his message to the world is truly authentic, and I think it's going to come across in his story today. And if you enjoy this episode, please share it out. Please leave us a review, and I hope you enjoy this episode with Michael O'Brien. Well, hello, Michael. Welcome to the show. I'm so glad that you're here.
I am so excited for this, Liz. So thanks for having me on. I just love what you're putting into the world. So it's going to be great to sit down with you.
Yeah, and like I was just saying, your work and what you're doing is perfect for the type of person that's tuning into this show. But before we get into the specifics of your work, can you give us a little bit of background about your life and the events in your life that led you to primarily your last bad day and the work that you're doing now?
Yeah. So I think growing up, we'll go back to those days. I grew up in upstate New York, and then I went to school in Virginia. And then a big moment happened when I left my undergrad experience in Virginia and went to DC. I met my wife through a personal ad. And this was before, I'm a bit older. So this is before Match.com and Tinder and all these other apps. It was an ad in the back of the Washington City paper. So, and it was like a serendipity moment, like that we met each other. And it's important as we go further into the story because I think it's vital that you surround yourself with people who bring out the best in you. And my wife and our girls bring out the best in me, and hopefully I bring out the best in them. So we met in DC. We had our first daughter there in DC. We went up to New Jersey because of the corporate job. We had another daughter, and I was doing the thing that I thought you're supposed to do. You know, you get a gig, you meet someone, you get married, you start to have a family, you buy a house, you work your way up the corporate ladder. As I was doing this, I didn't know how to deal with my stress because I had a pretty stressful job. It was a pretty high profile job, so a lot of pressure on me. And I would just pack my stress inside, just like punch it down, punch it down. I call it putting the rocks in your backpack. So I would just carry this pressure around. And I've always been an avid cyclist since I came off of training wheels when I was 4 or 5 years old. And I came out to New Mexico for an offsite meeting in 2001. And I brought my bike. The other attendees, my colleagues, brought their golf clubs. But I like to think of myself as a little bit of an innovator. I believed early on that cycling was the new golf. So I brought my bike. I was training for a ride, getting back into racing. And the morning of July 11th, a Ford Explorer crossed the center line of the road. It was traveling about 40 miles an hour based on what the police estimate from his skid marks. And he hit me head on. And I remember almost everything about that morning, like the sounds of me hitting his front grille and how I flew into the windshield and the screech of his brakes and all of that until I was knocked unconscious, as one would imagine, and then eventually regained my consciousness. And when I did, I realized I was fighting for my life, that this was an inflection point. There's so much that happens in life. And really, the one thing that we can expect is that the unexpected will happen. But I always thought it would happen to someone else.
Yeah.
And it happened to us. And I say us because it just didn't happen to me. It happened to my wife and our girls, and the ripple effect of it to family and friends and people we know. It was a community event, and it it was so surreal, but that's how it all started.
Wow. And so obviously that led you into more of a mindfulness practice. Can you talk about how that was part of the inflection point where you could have gone back to doing what you were doing before, but then you really did a 180?
Yeah, so back in 2001, to set the stage, we didn't have social media, we didn't have TEDx talks. There wasn't really a lot of places to go to learn about some things. And I knew really little about mindfulness. So what I thought mindfulness was sort of like this hippy dippy, crunchy granola thing that people in California do. I didn't think a serious business professional would do it. And when I came when I came out of the ICU into my full recovery, the doctors painted a pretty grim picture of my life. They said, "You're probably going to walk with difficulty. You're probably never going to get back on your bike again." And I tried to be all happy, Liz, on the outside, but deep down inside, I was so angry. I thought life was so unfair. I was like, I was playing by the rules. Why do bad things happen to good people? All that jazz. So here I was in the hospital, and I would often cry myself to sleep because I didn't, I really didn't know what to do. My whole identity was turned upside down. And one of my mentors told me, Michael, everything is neutral until you label it. And at first I was like, what are you talking about? I thought it was like a Yoda thing. He's like, all the events in your life are neutral until you label them, and you get to choose the labels. And at first, I really didn't know what to make of it. But I thought about it and thought about it. And then I realized, like, okay, if that's true, because I do believe it's true, then I can call the day of my accident anything. And that's why I decided to label it my last bad day. Because what I realized through mindfulness, which I finally discovered through just like coming back to my breath, which I'll get to here in a sec. But the whole notion of labeling that day as my last bad day is that if I have people in my life who love me and I love back, how can I call a full day a bad one? So I can have bad moments, which I've had plenty of since my accident, moments that make me angry and frustrated and overwhelmed and anxious and happy and joyous. So we all live like little moments to moments to moments to moments. Our days are a collection of moments. And to label a full day as a bad one seemed too binary to me.
Mm.
And that's so it's not really about rainbows and unicorns, like, oh, I've never had a bad day. It's more about really understanding how do I want to label the things that are happening for me in life versus maybe happening to me. So my first go with mindfulness was in a moment where I was like, I need to get out of the hospital. Because when you're in the hospital, at least for me, I just wanted to get back home.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to get back to the smells of your house. Like when you go away on vacation and you love going away, but then when you come home, it's like, oh, it's nice to go away, but it's always great to come back home. Because there's a coziness to your home, right? And there's smells that you like, and there's comfort. And I missed my home. I was gone for like over 3 months from my house
Mm,
and the smells, and I just really wanted to come back home. And what I knew being a lifelong athlete is that when things got overwhelming in a competition, whether you're pitching or a free throw, playing basketball or what have you, the coach would always say, "Hey, let's call a timeout. Let's take a deep breath." So I knew like the breath was vital. So what I decided to do, because I felt overwhelmed and I just wanted to get back home, I wanted to return to center, was to come back to my breath. So the next morning, I scooted out of my hospital bed into my wheelchair, found a quiet place in the hospital, which is hard to do. You don't sleep much in a
yeah.
hospital and it's not very quiet. And I did a box breathing pattern for the first time. And I knew that through the Navy SEALs. They call it something different, but basically it's a simple breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4. And I did that for about 5 minutes. And I was like, oh, okay. It was my way of beginning the day. And I was like, all
Mm,
right, okay, I feel good about the day. And it allowed me to set my intentions. And later I called those my PBR breaks because I thought I was being clever because a lot of people in the States think of PBR and they think of a beverage. And I thought it was a little shorthand because, again, still to say to someone, yeah, I'm practicing mindfulness in 2001
yeah.
as a corporate executive was really a no-go type of thing. At least that's what I thought. So I called these my PBR breaks, and people would be like, well, what are those? I'm like, oh, I'm pausing, I'm centering on my breath, and then I have a moment of reflection. And the moment of reflection is important because that's the space where I can practice gratitude. I can set my intentions as far as how I wanted to show up for the day, what did I want to do or say next. So it was a moment to frame things for me, which was really cool.
Wow. And then obviously you went on a journey from there. This is back in 2001. When did you decide that you wanted to start sharing what you had learned and the impact that mindfulness and breathwork had had on you with other people to make it more meta?
Yeah, it was really the pandemic.
Oh,
I
wow.
kept it. So I left the hospital and I did go back to my corporate life, but I decided to go back to my corporate life with a different playbook, a different script. That I was changing my relationship with me through mindfulness, which allowed me to change my relationship with others and also just my relationship with stress. I was
Mm,
learning how to deal with it better. So I felt pretty confident, not overly so, but pretty confident. I could go back to my corporate life because I did enjoy what I was doing. I didn't really enjoy how I was doing it. So I did
mm,
it differently. And doing it differently allowed me to get to the executive suite. But again, this is early 2000s. So I'm not talking up to folks that I'm practicing mindfulness and meditating. I had a team of 1,000 marketers and sales reps. So it wasn't like I was going to get into a big ballroom at some hotel in Atlanta or Dallas or wherever and say, okay, we're going to start the meeting with 2 minutes of meditation. I was not going to fly back then. So I kept it relatively quiet until I left my corporate life for this life in 2014. And I started to reference it very slightly in blog posts. But when the pandemic hit, I was like, this is a moment for mindfulness. And
yeah.
so from 2001 to 2020, when the pandemic hit, I furthered my studies. I was training to become a qualified teacher. I was doing all the behind the scenes work. But when the pandemic hit, I was like, if there was a moment that your mug, that's my acronym for Mother Earth, Universe, or God, depending on,
Mhm.
it's like whoever fills up your coffee mug, your
I
barista.
love that. I
Yeah.
love
So like,
that.
yeah. So like the ultimate barista, and you get to choose. And a lot of people would consider those three titles to be the same, which is totally cool too. I, I thought, wow, they're sending us a message that we need to be more mindful about how we're approaching our lives, how we're approaching each other, how we're treating the planet. Um, they almost gave us permission. They almost
Mm-hmm.
well, actually forced us
Yeah.
into pausing. Like, we're going to pause. And I didn't think it was a coincidence that COVID hit our breath, our respiratory system.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I felt was like, all right, we have to pause. We're struggling with our breath. And now it's a moment to really reflect. How do we wish to be when this is all over? And I started doing public meditations. And my approach is this: I believe in shorter practices. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm trained through mindfulness based stress reduction, which is a 45-minute practice a day. But the reality is, moms, dads,
Right.
business leaders, they don't have 45 minutes. Our morning routines are already filled with a lot of stuff, including just getting the kids off to school. So doing a 45-minute practice is not practical. So my feeling is if you don't have 10 minutes in the morning, I bet you have 5 times throughout the day where you have 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So do a 2-minute practice multiple times throughout the day. And so I started leading live practices through Zoom through the pandemic to support other people with shorter practices and really helped a whole bunch of people step into mindfulness in a non-judgmental, more secular way, um, leaving the the woo-woo stuff off to the side, which is really cool. It's just that's not this practice,
Yeah.
and make it really relatable for folks, so we could navigate the pandemic together in a more thoughtful way.
Yeah. I think, if you're someone who sees patterns a lot in life, if you've always been very observant and just had that kind of sixth sense, you would almost think that the bike accident, when it happened, was almost a preparation for all of that inner work that you had to do so that when the right time did come, you could then be a light for other people when they needed it the most. People who, again, like you said, don't have time, are not into the woo woo stuff, but who desperately need some kind of teaching to know how to tune into their own bodies, to calm their nervous system down, and to really connect to who they really are.
Yes, Liz, like spot on, like perfect. I believe that the accident happened for me to step into this calling.
Mm-hmm.
And it needed 2 decades of growth, of fertilizer, of watering, of nurturing to get to the moment where here we are almost 20 years later when the pandemic hits. And now I have grown in my practice to now share this with others. And as a guy, I'm really good with going down into the woo-woo parts of mindfulness and meditation. Like I'm well versed in all that. I believe if the moon can move the oceans, it's probably doing something to us. And
Yeah.
um, but my feeling is that there's a whole bunch of people, we'll call it in the middle, who may have heard of about mindfulness. Maybe that person is very similar to how I was back in 2001 before my accident. So we have a big country, we have a big planet, and most people are sort of fall into this middle.
Yeah.
And right now we're dealing with the stress of the day in a very unhealthy way. We're ignoring it, we're pushing it away, we're numbing it.
Mm-hmm.
We're not living with our health in mind, our well-being, and we're almost day trading our lives away.
Oh, for sure.
And so I want to try to remove every obstacle possible for them to step into a practice of mindfulness, to be more thoughtful about how they're living and how they're connecting with themselves and each other. And a whole bunch of people have started with pause, breathe, reflect, and have gone on to do a much deeper practice, which is great. Um, and I offer a lot of that too. Like we'll be doing a silent retreat online this coming Saturday. So
Mm.
I take little small steps to help build a practice over time. So I can look back over 20 years and say, wow, look how far I've come. But in today's world, we're so driven by hacks and quick fixes. And my feeling is let's take small steps together and do it consistently with some frequency over time. And we'll be able to look back and see that we're making a big difference in our lives. And when we do that, we make a difference in the lives of those people that we ripple into.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Small ripples leading to big waves. I
Yeah.
love that. That's one of your catchphrases. Can you expand on that and what that really means in the day to day, especially for someone who's like, okay, I know what mindfulness is. I've never really done it myself. How can I get started? And what are the benefits?
Yeah, sure thing. So growing up, I had a grandmother in New Hampshire. We'd call her Grammy in the mountains, in the white mountains of New Hampshire. And she had a farm. In the back of the farm, there was a pond. And I would go back to the pond and I would just collect rocks and I would skip stones on her pond. Like that's how I'd spend the afternoons. It was really like I felt like, Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer back there. And these ripples, I didn't know it at the time because I didn't know anything about physics or energy as a kid. It was all energy, those ripples dancing on the top of the pond. And so I've carried that forward with me in this way that we're all energy. We're all us humans or us creatures are in this sack of flesh and muscle and stuff, but we're ultimately energy and we can pick it up, right? So when you meet someone in person or even on a Zoom, almost immediately you can pick up on the vibe or the juju or the juice, or we use different words to describe it, but ultimately we're all energy. And so we get to choose how we show up. We get to choose what type of energy we bring into the world. And some ripples can be divisive and can be hurtful and painful. And other ripples can be compassionate and kind and loving. And so the concept I love to bring to people is like, hey, let's be mindful. Let's be thoughtful about what kind of ripple you put into the world because it travels and it
Yeah.
travels so much further than you realize. And so that as a start or a cornerstone. With our practice, I like to start off with like really short practices, like a minute or 2 minutes. And what we do is we just start with the basics. We let people know like you don't have to sit in a particular way. You don't have to sit in lotus position. You could be lying down, you could be seated, you could be standing. You're always at choice. And we start to learn how to begin to do this practice called meditation and mindfulness by first focusing in on our breath and not to beat ourselves up when we get distracted, when our attention gets pulled away. Like we come back to our breath, and that pulling away and coming back to our breath is the practice.
Hmm.
Because what mindfulness can help us do is it can help us focus better. And current day, there is a need for us to focus better, focus on the things that are truly important. We can get so distracted by the shiny objects or what we scroll or what we watch. So it's improved focus. That's a benefit. It's also expanding our awareness so we can see more.
Yeah.
There's a practice called open awareness. So we're not fixated just on the breath. It's just this openness. And we notice what's in our soundscape and what, how our breath feels or sensations in the body. And it's just that openness. So when we have greater awareness, then we might be able to see something from someone else's perspective. And right now we have such an addiction to being right.
Hmm.
And that divisiveness or divisiveness in our country, like, I'm right, you're wrong. This is the right team, you're on the wrong team. And I think what mindfulness can do is help us slow down and say, okay, is there another way of looking at this? What's someone else's perspective? And I may not necessarily agree with it, but at least we can have a conversation that's open about it. And
Right.
then the last bit is I like to think of a surfer on like surfing the waves. Like when you watch a surfer, it can be really graceful. And that surfer on the wave is making all these micro adjustments to keep her balance. And the thing about life is that it's sort of like the ocean. The waves keep coming. like the stressful moments will keep coming. So wave after wave will come onto shore, but we can learn how to surf the waves. We can ride on top of them or, tuck under the pipe. And in order to do that, there's something called equanimity, which is just finding that sweet spot. Because what mindfulness isn't, it's not all about chilling out and relaxing. There's a component to that. And in modern day, that's sort of how mindfulness is marketed. But I like to think of it as finding that sweet spot between hyper arousal and hypo arousal, that equanimity, so we can surf the wave just perfectly. So if we lean too far forward over the board or lean too far back, we're going to fall into the ocean. So what equanimity is finding that sweet spot where we have some harmony or some balance and we're making these micro adjustments. And if we can meet our moments that way, I think we can be more thoughtful in our decisions. And with that thoughtfulness, we can put a better ripple into the world.
Yeah, yeah. To me, this sounds a lot like just being present, like the Eckhart Tolle, the power of
Yes.
now, like operating from that part of the board on the wave. It's like it's so empowering in that moment, and it's like, of course, we all want to be in that position, but we're always so pulled forward, or we're always pulled to the past. So it's interesting that it's that difficult, but it's also that easy.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it's simple to describe, but hard to
Mm-hmm.
practice.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the really cool thing is if we start practicing it, we get better at it. It's there's a little adage in cycling is that it never gets easy. You just get faster. So as your as your fitness improves, you can get stronger. You can be faster at whatever you do, but it never gets completely easy. So when we practice mindfulness, we can get better at bringing our attention back to the present moment. But it never gets completely easy because things are always happening. So that whole notion of like, let's focus in on the breath, let's call that the present. And then something pops up on our computer or the dog barks or whatever. We can recognize that we're distracted, we're pulled away. Because the human brain, there's a study out of Harvard that the brain gets pulled away or loses its attention like 54% of the time. So we take that and then we just come back to our breath. We come back to the present. And each time we do that, it's almost like doing a bicep curl at the
Mm-hmm.
gym that we get stronger. So then we notice quicker when we're distracted and then we can come back to the present. And we can really be mindful of our moments. So I like to say that I try to help people prevent a bad moment from turning into a bad day or longer. So
Mm-hmm.
we've all had tough moments, bad moments, like big things that have happened and little things. And then we add fuel to them. We ruminate, we let them fester, and it ruins our whole day. And I'll acknowledge that when we have loss, when we're really grieving, that moment can last a while. And that will last more than a day, sometimes weeks, sometimes we never get past the grieving. We just live with it. So, but conceptually, it's we all have moments. Do we recognize them? Can we pull ourselves back into the present to say, okay, right now is my moment where I can do something thoughtfully? I don't have to give that moment that was already tough more fuel to make it worse than it is. It goes back to the parable of the first arrow and second arrow. We're going to have arrows being shot at us from external forces all the time. That's life. The second arrow is the one that we shoot at ourselves when we ruminate too much. We allow it to fester. And that second arrow is more painful than the first arrow.
I love that. Oh my gosh, we could end on that. We're almost out of time. If there were any final message, Michael, that you would want to share with the audience tuning in, what would that be?
I would say simply begin. Begin with just a minute. Begin with connecting with someone that you know who is like-hearted, so you have community. So whatever change you desire for the world, you can begin at any time. And sometimes we lose our way and we can simply begin again. And you can always come back to your breath. And I like to think we can always come back home. And the way I look at home today, because I know not everyone's home is ideal, but for me, home is here in our chest, in our heart, in our soul. And we can always return to that. And mindfulness allows us to come back home and connect with ourselves so we can be more thoughtful and put a beautiful ripple into the world.
I love that. I love that so much. Okay, so where can our listener find out more about you, get the app, and possibly work with you?
Yeah, so great question. Listen, thanks again for having me on. I love your energy. Speaking of
Likewise.
energy is, yeah. So, best place to go, you can get the app at the App Store, the Apple App Store or Google Play, and folks can pay whatever they can afford for the first year. So people
Oh,
can join for as little as $1. I want to remove every obstacle because I want people to step into this practice because this moment that we're living through calls for it. And they can learn more about me at pausebreathereflect.com. And they
perfect.
can connect with me there. And then from there, the social media channels are there in different ways that we can work together.
Beautiful. Well, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for the work that you're doing, for all the pre-work that you did leading up to this moment of the release of the app and all of the teachings that you're putting out into the world, the positive ripple effect. It's noticed, it's appreciated. So thank you.
You're welcome, Liz.
You have been listening to the Motherhood Unstressed podcast, where we navigate the beautiful chaos of motherhood together. For more inspiration and insights, please visit our website at motherhoodunstressed.com, or you can visit me on social at motherhoodunstressed. Remember, you are not alone in this journey. Until next time, stay unstressed, empowered, and embrace the joy of motherhood. Take care, and I'll catch you on the next episode.